I honestly believe Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay, Canada's broken because we're stupid.
These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
I mean, on one hand, he's saying find $25 billion in savings, but on the other hand, he's announced more than that in new spending. Like, I guess in November when you get the budget, maybe you'll get a chance to see how that's gonna pan out. But is that mixed signal make it hard for your office to find clarity in how you're gonna account for that?
Its mandate as a fiscal monitor, without any fiscal anchors being identified, a budget that has not been presented yet, and it sounds like it's going to be pushed back even further than what the Prime Minister promised earlier. Would you say it creates more uncertainty for potential business investment in Canada?
So, in that vein, for regular Canadians, can you explain just in simple words, what the Liberals mean when they say they're going to separate an operating budget from a capital budget? Like, what changes on the books when they do that?
So, to answer your last question first, the bottom line of the government will not change. And if the government wants to go 12 months without producing a budget, as a citizen, I'd feel a little bit uncomfortable.
We just watched a video about the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it's right below, in committee testifying, and this gentleman was so ready to divulge the issues that are created without a budget when you're the Parliament Budget Officer. Like, oh my goodness. Now the Liberals have sent in the propaganda squad. Vassy Kapelos is going to try to twist it around to confuse Canadians. That's my guess. I haven't seen this video yet, but he was in committee on this day. The next day, he's on CTV with Vassy Kapelos trying to hang him up. Again, check the video below, like it'll show you what he testified to, that Canadians are in trouble with Mark Carney not having a budget, and as a citizen, and this is coming from our Parliamentary Budget Officer, as a citizen, he's concerned. Anyway, we're going to see the propaganda machine right now, Vassy Kapelos, on behalf of CTV, like the Liberal paid for propaganda legacy media. Why do they call it legacy? I guess they're just out of words. But if you want to see what actually happened when the Canadian Parliamentary Budget Officer testified in front of committee, you can check that video. It's the top line in the description. This guy gets pulled in to the CTV. I'm pretty sure what's going to happen here is Vassy Kapelos is going to try to spin his testimony on behalf of the CTV Liberal propaganda paid for machine. Let's take a peek. Vassy Kapelos, you could be better than this. Let's take a look at how low you're going to go. I don't mean to get ahead of myself. We'll check in at the end of the video and see if I was correct.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Hi, Mr. Jacques. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thanks
so much for the invitation to be here.
Thank you very much for coming into studio. I appreciate it. We just heard from the Bank of Canada governor about his view of the state of the Canadian economy and really how I think U.S. tariffs and the trade war with the U.S. is impacting the economy. What is your view right now on the way in which that set of information is impacting the finances of the government, or could impact the finances of the government?
And again, building on the statement from the governor today, it's evident that the Canadian economy is not necessarily in the best shape. I think, as the governor put it, it doesn't necessarily feel particularly rosy out there right now. Even if we're going to have positive growth going forward, it's not going to feel particularly great. And there's a direct linkage with respect to the state of the nation's finances, so the government's budget deficit. As you probably are aware, we published our last economic and fiscal outlook just before the election. And things have gotten a little bit worse since that time on the economic side. Certainly, uncertainty has continued to persist. It's certainly built with respect, uncertainty's certainly increased with respect to our trade with the U.S. and the potential outcome of trade agreement renegotiations. And you're really starting to see it in terms of on the side of business investment and also some impacts on labor markets. So of course, over the course of the summer, 100,000 Canadians losing their jobs. So it's not necessarily the economic side. And of course, if you don't have a job, you're not paying taxes. You expect some sort of supports from the government, either through employment insurance or other types of supports. And of course, the combination of lower revenues and higher expenses means higher deficits overall.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, particularly on the revenue side. If the economy in the second quarter is contracting, the trend continues and unemployment is up and unemployed people need help from the government, will that, in your view, ultimately have a depressive impact on revenue? Like, is it almost a foregone conclusion?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the way in which the federal finances are structured. During periods of downturn in the overall economy, deficits increase because spending increases. We have a social safety net. It's in place so that when people across the country face hard times, collectively, as Canadians, we've agreed that the federal government is going to step in and help people out, both in the short term to make sure that they're not going to lose their homes, but also over the longer term to make sure that they can receive retraining so they can move into their next job. And then at the same time, while they're doing that, it would be pretty unfair to ask them to pay taxes on money that they're not earning. So of course, revenues go down at the same time. But hopefully, what we've seen over the past 75 years, once we get out of the recession and once we get out of this sticky economic situation, things start to turn to the positive side. So the deficits should start to shrink.
In the interim, while we exist in this period of uncertainty and while the negotiations, for example, around CUSMA are still to start and then become ongoing, there's a lot of focus obviously on this budget. I know you're well aware of that. We haven't had a budget since April of 2024. How important is this one?
I am at great pains not to engage in hyperbole. So this budget ends up being important.
You're definitely not a politician then, yeah.
No, this is easily one of the most important, it's one of the most important budgets that I've probably seen since I started working in the Department of Finance in 1998. So we have a budget where it needs to address a fundamental assumption in our economy and how our economy worked, and that was we are tied at the hip with the United States, and that's gone. So all of our historical economic modeling that was based upon the idea that don't worry, as the US recovers and grows again in 2, 3, 4 years, we have those connections and those supply chains, and things will start to take off for us. That's gone out the window at this point. And so at a macro level, what we're looking for, certainly on our side in the budget, is a plan, an economic plan that will demonstrate how the federal government expects to intervene and provide those supports as part of the transition. Again, going back to the point that the governor made today with respect to monetary policy, he indicated there's no going back, there's only going forward. And in the case of monetary policy can help in the transition. It can't necessarily fix all the problems. On the fiscal policy side in the budget, similarly, we're looking for how the federal government's planning on supporting that transition. I think the other aspect, and something we're really interested in and we're watching carefully, is the government's indicated that they're planning on changing the overall presentation of the budget. So going from what people are kind of used to, so a bottom line, deficit, surplus, how much money you're borrowing, that type of thing, to having those numbers and then also presenting things a little bit differently. The government hasn't clearly indicated what they have planned at this point, but that's something we're watching carefully.
They haven't communicated that to your office yet? Because I know a number of months ago your predecessor also said, like, I don't know what the difference will be yet. Like, I don't know how they're going to define it.
Yeah, they've consulted with us on some ideas, and at this point we're still waiting until budget 2025. And on our end, obviously, if you have a really important budget, probably, as I mentioned, and critically important budget that parliamentarians are going to be voting on, having multiple votes on very soon, if things are presented differently, if they can't quite understand what's in there, then obviously for us, the Parliamentary Budget Office, the organization that supports parliamentarians of all stripes, regardless of whether they're good with calculators or not, we need to make sure that they're supported in understanding what the government's actually proposing.
Do you anticipate you'll know what the difference is prior to the tabling of the budget, or do you think you'll find out with the rest of us?
If history is a leading indicator, probably at the exact same time. I will also hopefully receive an invitation to an embargoed briefing on November 4th. Right. And at 10 a.m. I will be sitting in a darkened room going through the budget documents, trying to have a good understanding of what's actually in there.
So There are some things that they've said so far, both in the election campaign, in which their fiscal plan was actually a feature of their campaign, and then in the time since. And I think one of the things that stood out to me and has led to a lot of questions to politicians in the government is around the spending side of things, so the operations side of things. They've clearly said the government is spending too much on the operations of government. They identified over, I believe it was a 3-year period or until 2028, a $15 billion gap that they wanted to close. Now the question turns to, well, how essentially will you get there? And there's this conversation about cuts, obviously, right? Every department has been asked to cut 15% over a period of time, but more specifically on the public service. And I know your office has done some analysis of how much is being spent, even when the numbers decrease, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if you could do a bit of a reality check. Like, in order to close a $15 billion gap, would there have to be actual jobs lost, or is attrition enough?
There's definitely going to be, so in order to close that type of gap, one, I'd say, again, I go back to the fact that the government hasn't actually offered a clear definition of what operating and capital are at this point. So we're kind of shadow boxing with definitions, like they say they're going to close the operating budget or close the deficit in the operating budget. To determine whether that's reasonable or not, somebody actually has to define what the operating budget is. That said, for the order of magnitude that you're looking at, it would be highly unlikely that you'd be able to close a deficit or reach a number that big without the path going through personnel costs. So without some sort of reduction or substantial changes in the composition of the public service. Because something else the government's indicated, so there have been a lot of messaging, not necessarily all of it consistent up to this point.
Fair.
But something they also indicated is that they're planning on expanding in some areas. So they talked about the Canadian Forces, Canadian Border Services, and I think those plans are already being implemented. So they're expanding in some areas on top of the potential 15% or $15 billion worth of cuts. So one can anticipate that there might be some movement on that front. But I think it's safe to say it would be highly unlikely that you're going to see that type of gap being closed simply through attrition at this point. And something I mentioned during my first committee appearance yesterday, it makes it really complicated if the only mechanism to reduce the overall size of the public service is attrition. I enjoy lunch and meats, so I trust the food inspectors to go out. Potentially the food inspectors are all really old, and potentially they're going to retire over the next 3 to 4 years. I hope those food inspectors are going to be replaced.
Right.
And I hope that the young people that are preparing PowerPoint presentations for their executives that never see the light of day in the government department of your choice, potentially those people, you can shift some of those resources around so I can still enjoy my lunch and meats. But potentially, and that's the risk with attrition, it just becomes really complicated to end up hitting your targets and also manage the public service. Because and something I think my predecessor indicated, it really isn't, the numbers around the public service, the size, it's really big. Like, you can't get away from it. Like an $80 billion wage bill, $172,000 a year in average compensation. And at the same time, they're all linked to something. They're all linked to a program, a specific program. And if you're focused on simply reducing the people that you've hired and you haven't taken a hard look at the programs that are actually being implemented and set priorities, potentially you're focusing on the wrong things and you're making things more challenging for yourself.
Okay, I have to leave it on that note. I'm out of time. Thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
But did she try to twist it around? If I was right in the intro, subscribe to the channel, like, share, and tell people what is going on. This is a propaganda machine. I don't want to say too much, but that happened, right? Like I called it, and then that happened. I watch a lot of Canadian federal politics, mostly the politics, but I follow the news too, which always confuses me because I see what happens and then they tell a different story than how it actually goes down. If you want to see how it actually goes down, subscribe and follow the channel. I show the real hardcore stuff. We do it live very often. We show all the question periods live. If you want to see the real politics in context, this is a good spot to find it. Like, again, I'm somebody with a critical mind. I don't agree with everything that conservatives do, I'm just a Canadian, a voter that cares, that has a critical mind and follows politics and knows right now the only way to correct the course is through a Conservative vote, because all the other parties fall under Liberal rule. They need the Liberal money, which is your money, which you don't donate. They're taxes, but the Liberals fund them. That's how it goes. A lot of Canadians know all of this already. That's great. But it's the other people I'm worried about. Some that have their eyes that are starting to open, their ears are, tuning in. But this government is looking to change it so much that Canada won't be recognizable. I'm not a paranoid mind. I watch all of what is happening. I've read the books. I do research. That's it. Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe, get notified if you'd like to learn more about real Canadian federal politics and what is going down, and have the pieces shown in context so you can make up your own mind. I get on here and give my 2 cents as well. But once you see the politics, that's what I want you to see, not listen to me. Watch the politics, make up your own mind. I trust Canadians. There are some that are naive and not informed, and human nature. It is human nature to not want to admit to being fooled. They did dupe a lot of people. I was fooled for a period of time, for years perhaps. Like in 2015, I voted for Trudeau. Like, I didn't know better. I didn't see it coming then. I see it coming now. I saw Carney coming. I knew that would be a problem for our country.
I honestly believe Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid. Okay, Canada's broken because we're stupid.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.